Welcome everybody to this Finance Committee meeting. We'll be looking at the 9 months result for March 2023. But before we kick off, firstly, I'd like to welcome you all here and just like to say karakia. Tuia ke runga, tuia ke raro, tuia ke waho, tuia ke roto. Tuia ki te here tangata, ka rongo te po, ki rongo te au, hui e, haki e. Thank you. The apologies, we have Kevin recorded there. Do we have any others? Alexa.
Councillor Walls is not.
I'll move.
Joined.
Okay, move that these apologies accepted by Andrew, seconded by Kate. Thank you. We have a spot for the public forum, but we don't have anyone here for that, so we'll move on. Just looking at the agenda, is everyone okay with that at the moment? Is there anything to be added to the agenda? Okay, that's good. We'll just confirm the agenda. And the other thing we do need to just ask is any kind of declaration of interest, so any items on this agenda where we have conflicts. No, thank you. Just looking at the minutes from our last meeting, the minutes of the 23rd of February, there is one change I'm aware of at the moment. We'll see if there's any others, but we have a change to note 7.2 in regards to the rates strike collection. The word mailed is to be changed to emailed. Is there any other changes to the minutes? Okay, thank you, Andrew. Seconded. So Kate Wilson, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the quarterly financial report to the 31st of March 2023. Nick and Sarah and Mike, thank you.
That's a really old habit.
We've got time to balance up the room, but you.
Thank you.
So content-wise, this is the same quarterly report that you normally receive, but we have changed the order around as requested in the last Finance Committee meeting. So the order starts now with the Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expenses, the SCREE, and then it goes to the Statement of Financial Position, the activity financial summary, which includes the variances which are greater than 100,000 in both the revenue and expenses for the activities. It then goes to the activity performance report, which is what Mike does, which is our performance measures, which will then go into the annual report. So those are how the measures currently sit at March. And then it's got the detailed activity report and the treasury report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you want me to step you through each of the reports. Is that, yep?
Yeah, if you could do that.
Yep. Okay, so the Statement of Comprehensive Revenue and Expenses is for the 9-month period to the 31st of March. So we've still got one quarter to continue for our year end of 30 June. What's going on and what's causing the variances is similar to what has happened in the previous quarters. So we have a mismatch between what we budgeted for the subsidies and grant revenue and the other income. Most of that has been caused by transport. So we obviously budgeted for fare revenue. However, the government came out and has been giving us a 50% subsidy for the buses. So that comes in as grant revenue from Waka Kotahi, as opposed to how we budgeted that as other income, which would have been fare revenue. Now, there is some other things going on in transport, which is we hadn't budgeted for the $2 flat fares. So there is also a bit of a reduction in revenue sitting there due to the continuation of the $2 fares, which are 50% from the government. So they're $1 for the fare holder. Very confusing. Other income is also
Just to clarify that one, Sarah, that's a positive variance showing against subsidies and grant revenue.
it is a positive variance for subsidies and grants revenue, and obviously a negative variance because the income's not sitting in other income.
Yeah.
There is also a few other things that are going on in other income that's causing the negative variance. So some of that is the consent processing revenue is below budget. There's a bit of reduction in the compliance monitoring revenue. The land and water science, we had budgeted in the end that Otago Regional Council would run LAWA. Now that has been removed from, it's in the past, it's always been run by Regional Council, and that was held by Otago Regional Council for quite some time. That has now gone up to the Regional Holding Group. So it's no longer being run by Otago Regional Council, but it does not have a financial impact in the fact that the revenue and expenses netted off. Other regional councils contributed to the running of LAWA. We're not receiving those contributions. Equally, we don't have the expenditure for LAWA. You have a question?
Oh, well, I do have a question on that. I was surprised to read that in a financial paper and not know about it otherwise, because it does have potentially a staff impact, and the staff that were working on that area enjoy doing that sort of stuff, and if we lose that resource.
Sure. So the staff that worked in LAWA actually have been transferred to Regional Holdings and still work in LAWA. So they used to be employed directly by Otago Regional Council. They're now no longer employed directly, and they are employed still on LAWA, but just by the Regional Holding Group.
And that's just that LAWA, the cost of LAWA. We've still got our own staff that are feeding information into LAWA.
But that staff member used to be part of that team though, and they're no longer here.
No, they are.
They are still here.
Yeah, but they're
still here, but they're not paid by us.
They're now being funded through regional services,
And that's
regional
absolutely
software
fine.
holdings.
And that relieves my those are opportunities to be leading projects nationally that it is important they stay in. But that and it shouldn't be discussing this in financial. It's just noting that we should have possibly had that heads up.
To all intents and purposes, it's exactly the same as it is. It's just now not being funded through our financials. It's being funded through regional services holdings, and we still pay our share. We just pay to RSHL, but they now fund that employee, as opposed to previously we had them in our P&L, and all of that funding came to us to cover all of that cost.
Okay, thank you. That's relieving.
We also have in the other income, it was budgeted to receive income for the Alexandra Flood Protection Scheme. So that's in an agreement with Contact Energy, and I understand that was discussed at the last Finance Committee, but it is still being negotiated. So that revenue we haven't got recognised in our profit and scree, but it is expected to come in before 30 June.
Is that included in the forecast figure beside it?
It will be included in the forecast because it is expected. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Andrew.
I'm a bit grumpy about that because, we had, and this is no disrespect to the negotiating that's happening behind the scenes with my staff. All I'm saying is that here we have Contact Energy who have an agreement with us, or we have an agreement with them by a certain amount of money to offset the cost of the Alexandra Flood Protection Scheme. We have had to spend 9 months negotiating with Contact Energy and still without a resolution. I just think it seems bizarre, unfair, and we wouldn't allow this to happen. The ratepayer, for example, there will be some consequences if you didn't pay your rates after 9 months. So I'm just saying this is unacceptable. I'd like to know what we could do as a governance, as the governance of the Otago Regional Council, to either crack the whip or rattle the cage in some way, shape or form. Do we need to shame them publicly? I don't want to do that today, but I feel that we're getting to the point that this is just unacceptable. So sorry to blurb that out, but I had to put it out because I think it's unfair and unacceptable.
Have you got a response to that?
I think the response to that is that it's work in progress, and it's being worked through with them. Series of meetings is going on, and it's a negotiation. So we're working as fast as we can.
Okay,
Well, on that, I'm just wondering whether at this time, because this is not the first time or the second or the third or the fourth time that this has come up, whether it's actually that we should be doing subsequent motion to something that we direct staff to try and negotiate a long-term resolution to this, whether it's done by a CPI index of some sort, that it's done once for the whole time rather than this annual tortuous process.
That's exactly what's happening now.
so staff are actually doing this already, Kate?
Yeah. That's what staff are doing.
Any other questions? Right.
Thank you. It says the Queenstown Ferry Service was 585,000 below budget.
Mhm.
My understanding is that ferry service operation was a good news story. Can you just talk me through the financials around it?
So that's still sitting as a trial. It
Yeah.
has never gone past its trial period. I'm unsure how long in the original meeting that trial was meant to be happening for. I wasn't at the transport committee for
I
that, but
suspect
the way that the revenue works is originally we budgeted that the ferry would operate very much like a bus. So people would pay a fare and that would then be collected by Otago Regional Council and we would pay the supplier to actually run the ferry. Now, under the trial period, it had a different contract. So that was how we budgeted for the ferry, but under the trial period, it's got less trips, I suppose. Do you call trips on a ferry than what was
It's not-
originally planned?
Well, there might be a bit of less trips, but the difference is what Sarah's describing. The budget was done on a gross contract basis, the same way that bus contracts are done, where we pay the gross cost to the operator, and we collect all the revenue. This is still operating as a trial under a net contract basis, where we just provide a subsidy of the net. We provide a net subsidy, so hence you see a big variance in the revenue and the contract costs, because it's actually the budget and the actual are happening on two different bases.
Okay, so subsequent question, from a financial basis, should I still be under the understanding that the ferry service in Queenstown operationally has been a financial success? Should I still be under that understanding?
I think you saw in the last Public and Active Transport committee meeting, they gave some information on the public transport, including the ferries, on patronage and revenue. And I think from memory there that the revenue was higher than what we had been expecting. Yeah. So that that's based on
that's fine.
on a net basis, sort of changing what we had there to a net basis, and then it has been higher.
Cool, thank you.
When you talk about a net basis, Nick, you're saying that what you're taking is the difference between the income and the cost, and you're just bringing that difference, that surplus in.
Yeah. So
So you've got an
effectively,
offset of your costs as well as your.
we fund the net shortfall.
Yep.
So it's more of a a subsidy cost to us,
Yep,
rather than us funding the full cost of that service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I think we interrupted Sarah's presentation. Didn't we?
No, it's okay. No, it's fine. So if I move on to the interest and investment income, so the variance here, you'll see that we've got a variance in the interest and investment income as well as the finance cost. So which is just down the bottom in the expenditure section. This has been caused by we didn't budget for lending money from the LGFA to Port Otago. So that's what's causing the majority of that variance that's there.
Sorry, whereabouts are you, Sarah?
So the bottom line just before total revenue. So these are three. Are you after I'm on page 10 for where I'm describing it in the bullet point in paragraph 3. But the lines that I'm talking about on the screen is the interest and investment income line of 3.5 million versus our budget of 300, and the finance cost, which is 3.5 million versus our budget of 187,000.
But it's at the end of the financial year, it's zero.
So the net
Yeah.
cost for us of borrowing to Port Otago is zero.
Yeah.
So we receive income and expenditure that nets to zero. There is a slight variance in the investment income that's actually been caused by our managed fund. So the
Yeah,
investment
it's-
income is Port Otago and our interest that we've received from the managed fund. So there is also a component that I've got there in a sentence at 345,000 just for the managed fund, which is performing higher than we budgeted
Mhm.
for interest, which is our bonds that are in the managed fund.
Yeah, I think it is useful, if I may, to note that it's always going to be over an annual basis, zero.
Yep.
Because otherwise people think we're,
I think it's worth looking at forecasts in the annual plan budget for that purpose. That gives you the 12-month.
yeah, no, I appreciate it, but it's in the commentary, it isn't clear that it's always going to be over an annual zero, and that's the way we should do
And
it.
that has been corrected in the annual plan. So obviously this is what we're doing, and those figures will be in our future budget going forward in the annual plan, and they are as in the forecast.
Thank you.
The last variance really on the screen that's quite large, I think it's the last one. Oh, sorry, second to last, is employee benefits expense. So our employee FTE number is still lower than what we budgeted, which obviously has the effect of having a lower payroll cost. So that's 2.9 million below budget. I've also included, similar to our previous report, to my previous reports, a table which shows the FTE numbers via directorate. So you can see we've had a very, very slight increase in Q3, not quite a person. So they are, we are stabilised in the fact that it is, from looking at payroll and being the person in charge of payroll, it does seem to be quite stable, but we aren't at that FTE number, which was 334. So there's quite a difference between our current FTEs of 290 and the 334 that was budgeted. So I would expect that cost to continue, obviously, to be a deficit at 30 June.
So just to summarise that, we've got revenue of 74,123,000. We've got total costs of 76,018,000, and we're showing a current deficit of $1.894 million,
Yes.
which is a variance of 1.550. Sorry, a variance of
Variance of
345 against our
345,
plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct.
And just looking out to the end of the 12-month period in that forecast column, we're predicting that total revenue to be 102,268,000, costs of 108,136,000. So a operating deficit of 5.8 million. Okay.
Yes. So we do receive, the way that the council works is that we do receive quite a lot of our costs in the last quarter. So some of that is caused by planning and the fact that these programs need to, kick off. There's a planning element as well as like establishing those contracts, and in some cases, consultation with the landowners if we're going out to do something on their land. And then of course the costs all come in at the last minute because it tends to be a 12-month program. So that is why we do tend to have a higher amount of cost and expenditure that happens in that last quarter.
Okay. And we actually have to offset because we've got other gains coming through.
Sure. So the other gains line that is sitting there, so the other gains line at the 31st of March of 1.1 million, that is the gain that we have made on the managed fund. So that is actual and realised. Well, it's not realised because it's unrealised because we haven't actually cashed up. It's unrealised gains on our managed fund. It's difficult to forecast where that will be at the 30 June. I think if anyone in this room could forecast what the share market is going to do by 30 June, we probably wouldn't be here. We'd all be living off our gains. So unfortunately, we've just put the annual plan figure in there because we can't really crystal ball that. There is also the revaluation gain or loss on the shares of the subsidiary to come in at 30 June, and that is our revaluation of Port Otago. So again, we're unsure of what that will be. We haven't yet even provided an estimate to the valuer for 30 June. That is done in July.
So overall, we're looking at a variance of that against our annual plan, an operating variance of 2.6 million.
Forecasted, yes.
Forecasted, yeah. All right, thank you. Any quick, Kate? Yep.
There seem to be two things that week foreseeable that have had a major, the PT is a substantial part of that, and and that is what it is, and that's been a problem throughout all of it, New Zealand, exacerbated by our low flat fare, potentially worse. But anyway, the two items that I see that are more nuances, one is our regional the regional policy statement work, and that's about 500,000.
Higher than budgeted, yes.
Yeah, unbudgeted and direct result, I think, of changes, and that's really hard where government changes things and we're playing catch up and being the guinea pig. And I've dealt with that in other conversations. But the other one is our consents, which seems to be substantially under. Now, that again can be a result of government changes where I think we staffed up for something that didn't necessarily happen. But also understanding how we recover on those operations, they are operating expenses that we can't recover. Now, there's 2.7 as a debit in there, isn't there? Or is that the next page on debtors? Is some of that outstanding accounts that may come in by the end of the year for?
So trade debtors. So if I talk about
Is that trade debt?
balance sheet,
In the next section, is it?
trade debtors, even if a consent holder hadn't paid their consent, it would be sitting in our revenue figure until we had potentially provided for that debt, and it would be normally a substantial amount of time that we would then provide for it. Most consent holders
So
provide.
that's not the effect. Okay, that's good to know.
Just to clarify on where you say the other thing is, because you're quite right, the big things that are impacting this year and the forecast are PT, RPS, and it's regulatory revenue.
Yeah.
It's not just consents
Sorry.
revenue. So
Yes.
in there is consents, and there's also compliance,
Yeah.
and performance monitoring. So all three parts of that have lower revenue. The consents one there is factored in there. One of the things that we've corrected in the annual plan for next year, if you remember, there had been the assumption through the LTP that 3 science staff or the equivalent of 3 FTE would be working in consents full time. So those FTE were allocated there. That's not how that's actually worked out.
Mhm.
So that's one of the reasons I think, Tim, you asked when we were doing the annual plan workshop about what's the fees and charges revenue for next year's annual plan, and it's dropped by $500,000. So one of the reasons why the consent side of that regulatory revenue is below is because they never had that cost come through. So they can't, although we assumed they were going to have those staff and that cost, they've got all their other consent staff that they're looking to charge out, but they didn't have those 3 staff. So of course they were never going to recover that portion of the revenue. Yep.
And if I can add to that, we have the consents team and the compliance team actually have more work in terms of numbers of consents through. We're just doing it with less FTEs than budgeted. So when you have an FTE, it's assumed there'll be 60% cost recoverable, and that money will then go to your revenue. But we haven't needed to fill those vacancies, but that revenue assumption still sits there. So we're doing more work, potentially more cost efficient, but there are some FTE vacancies and those science ones sitting there as well.
Okay, so while it looks worse because of deficit, there's actually a balancing savings in FTEs.
There is like if you take of that where you see the revenue, the consents part of that is well, not all of it, but sort of the 3 FTEs worth is being offset by lower cost. Yeah. So then you get to the deficit part is lower than just the pure revenue. But as I said, there's 3 parts to it. You've got, it's not regulatory, it's not all just consents, and we still assume regulatory revenue from the compliance. So through enforcement and infringements, and they do audits and those sort of things, which some of that revenue is a little bit lower. And then there's performance monitoring, where we charge for processing all of the compliance data.
Yeah. And again, I just want to see if there's a good news story here or a bad news story, or neither, not a story at all. But it occurred to me, I know that we've got staff out there doing the job more than we've ever had before. But if you're not getting enforcement income and you're not costing more in performance, does that mean that actually what we're seeing is better results and more efficiency, both within the staff but also out in the fields, so to speak? And that's a good news story, but it makes it budgeting particularly hard.
So from my point of view, yes, the teams are really busy in doing the things that they need to be doing. There was some budget matters at the start of the financial year that we were never going to be able to achieve because of those assumptions that were there and those science FTEs that have been there. And then we've also had a few court cases successfully through the compliance team, but that also cost money in terms of taking those cases to court as well. So from the regulatory group's point of view, yes, and a lot of those issues have been corrected in year 3 of the budget and with that revenue assumption coming down as well.
Thank you.
And Kate, I just want to draw your attention to the detailed activity report that's at the end of my section. That actually has detailed out by activity the revenue and expenditure, and then their surplus.
Can you give me a
deficit.
page number or a heading?
Look, we'll get down to that.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
It's on the agenda and we'll
Yeah.
get there. Okay, so
Thanks.
are there any further questions? Okay, should we move down and just have a look at the statement of financial position?
Okay, so the statement of financial position is obviously at the 31st of March. We have had, looking at this from the previous second quarter, we've had an increase in our cash, but that was caused because we ran out of cash flow and borrowed some funds from the LGFA. So I just wanted to draw your attention. The reason why that's a little bit higher is that we've actually drawn down ourselves as council against the LGFA funding that we have, funding line that we have. Trade receivables has a variance of 5.5 million compared to 30 June. This balance is quite difficult to compare quarter on quarter. So the majority of that balance is actually a dividend receivable. So we accrue our dividend revenue that we're going to receive from Port on a monthly basis. We accrue how much based on our agreement that we have, we would be expecting to receive, but we only receive it 3 times a year. So that can sometimes between the quarters actually throw out that receivable balance because obviously we would, part of that $3 million of that is actually the dividend receivable from Port. GST, it goes up and down each month, our GST return, not very much. It's always a receivable apart from when we strike our rate, which we then obviously have quite a significant payable balance because we invoice once a year. And then there was a bit of a movement in debtors. We have been changing a little bit in what we're doing with debtors. So not changing how we invoice, but we are trying to communicate a bit more with debtors. So and a bit earlier with debtors and via different means. So we've had some feedback from farmers that they would much rather appreciate an e-text as opposed to a phone call about potentially an invoice that's outstanding as they're out in the field, and it's a lot easier for them to pick up and deal with later. So there is some things that we're doing around there with debtors and just making sure with the economy the way it is that we're, you know, touching base with those people and putting in payment plans, etc. if needed. We've then got other financial assets. So other financial assets is our managed fund. So that is the balance sheet item of our managed fund. As I spoke about in the screen, we've had obviously an increase in the value of that. Property, plant and equipment has decreased by 309,000. It's just being caused really by depreciation and a bit of we've had all of our additions and disposals that we would expect. We're a little bit behind in some capital expenditure for engineering, but it's not that it's not expected, it's just that they're a little bit behind from what we originally budgeted. I'm just kind of going through the rest of it. Is there any questions on the rest of that?
So summary, we've got total assets of $986 million there, and we've got total liabilities of 91 million and non-current liabilities 67. So we're in a very healthy balance sheet position, aren't we, in terms of our the organisation's financial position, with net assets of $827 million. Yeah.
Look, a question, and I don't want to go. It's one that's probably more a leadership one, but we never actually get a chance to discuss it. In your vehicles, plant vehicles of 1.239 thousand turnover. Do we have a policy around vehicles yet that we're actually going to be leaders in the sort of vehicles we buy and reducing carbon? Because we actually never, last time I tried to raise this, I was shut down. so this is the only time I can raise it. So it never gets on our agenda otherwise. Apologies. At what stage in the previous councils I've been in, we set it as council a policy that we look at low carbon.
So-
vehicles?
You can go. You
Okay,
probably
so-
know the vehicle
so-
policy.
yeah, so I was going to say vehicle policy. So in the vehicle policy, we do have a section that relates to additions, so buying, purchasing new vehicles. Included in that is a health and safety element. So what is the vehicle being used for? And it needs to have the correct star rating for, obviously, if this is a vehicle that's going to be on the open road, it needs to have the correct star rating to protect our staff. As you guys have heard, I've sat in multiple meetings, that is obviously a risk for our staff, is obviously driving vehicles on the road is one of our highest health and safety risks. There is a climate element to looking at the vehicle, but it's also its purpose. So obviously there's the health and safety element and its purpose. So at the moment, quite a lot of those plant and vehicles is actually ute replacement. And so the staff require the vehicles and they're required to have a certain range. And at the moment there isn't an environmentally, I mean, electric would be
we
what I'm
know that.
assuming you're asking for. There isn't an electric ute that's available for us to actually replace that with. So for the purpose of what the staff are requiring off-road, requiring four-wheel drive to actually go over farms, unfortunately we are buying, I'm assuming you would prefer us not to buy it, and it is in our policy that we do look at it, but also it's not great buying them an electric car that they're going to try and drive across a farmer's paddock and get stuck or run out of battery. So we actually need to make sure that we buy something that's fit for purpose for what they're using.
Okay, I get that. And I suppose what I would be really good to get reporting is those cars that aren't utes, and I think we have quite a few of those, actually, that we actually start seeing a recording of what we're doing is to change that.
I think we could bring a separate report on where we're at, and we'll cover that when we, as part of the LTP, when we do these current state briefings. But we do with the other vehicles, yes, we have been moving to purchasing hybrids. So basically our non, if you like, our non-ute fleet, we've been moving away from what we previously had with predominantly diesel ASXs to Toyota RAV4 hybrids. We haven't gone to any fully electric because we've still got a range issue of where we're going to, and whether people are actually able to charge them. But obviously with the and even our own inability to install charging at Stafford Street because we've got electrical issues there. So the new building will allow us to move to some fully electric. But at the moment, as we go through, we assess it first on safety and requirements, and then where we can, we look at can we go to electric, or if not, can we go to hybrid? So we step through those processes when we purchase. As a result, we've now got, and I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but we've got a number of RAV4s in the fleet. And as a result, although we've got more vehicles, we're doing more kilometres, our actual carbon emissions is reducing in vehicles, which we're monitoring that. We get that assessed every year. We haven't brought that report to you, which we need to do as well.
I'm delighted to hear that, but it is one that I would love to see us start to get. Thank you.
Michael, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've sat on this council for 7 years now, and I've never got a report. It's probably because we haven't asked for one, on our fleet policy, on the cars, the trucks, the utes that we own, on their cost each year, and on a review of whether or not we conduct policy correctly in that area. I'm flagging that now as something that we need to discuss ahead of the long-term plan, please.
Okay, thanks, Michael. We've noted that. All right, are there any further questions on the balance sheet or what's known as the statement of financial position? Okay, thank you, Sarah. We can move on to the activity reporting.
Okay, so the activity financial report shows, this is a summary of the revenue, expenses and surplus with the main programs and the 4 activities that we have them as broken down in the annual report. This table, just to be clear, includes operating and capital. So the scree that we spoke about before was just obviously revenue and expenses, and the balance sheet is assets. So, but this includes both operating and capital. So it is both your actual cost and budgeted cost for that. And then flowing on from this table, I create in the following pages any variance in each of the programs underneath that have a variance greater than 100,000. And so that's split based on revenue and then expenses. And then there's comments and commentary on why those variances have occurred. Or yeah, do you want me to? Does anyone have any questions on that?
Does anyone else have a question? Kate?
Oh, just the biodiversity implementation, which doc maintain the gains project was that? This is on page 16.
Sure, yes. So what's happening with that is that we have a contract with DOC in relation to our wild and conifers, and we have contracts that are signed, they're doing the work and the suppliers are out there doing the work. However, we haven't received those invoices back from DOC on exactly which areas have been completed. So there's a completion sign off where they obviously do the work and then it's checked that it's done to the correct standard, and then we are invoiced by DOC. That final stage hasn't happened yet. So we recognise the revenue when the expenditure is there. So because we haven't received the expenditure, it is that revenue is slightly behind schedule from what was planned. I'm sorry, what was budgeted.
Yeah, it's not really at risk, it's just a timing.
If the money, so the contracts are run annually, so we have already received the money for that from central government, and if the contracts are not finished, there does need to be a negotiation on whether we can roll those. We have always historically been able to roll those contracts, but I understand from talking to the manager in charge that that negotiation hasn't happened, as they are expected currently to be finished before year end. But if that doesn't happen, then that would be a negotiation with central government.
Michael, you still got your hand up from last time, or is this a new one?
No, I'm very sorry. I should have taken it down.
Good. So I guess, Sarah, just if we're looking at these activity centres, is there any particular activity which is of concern at all in regards to financial management?
Yeah, we've probably already mentioned those with what Kate was talking about with the RPS and the transport. They are the main areas. There is a small, you'll see variances in the safety and resilience section and around flood protection and river management. Most of those variances we've been told by engineering and timing differences. So you'll see in my commentary that they have been just caused by delays in the resourcing, and some of it is river conditions. Yeah. you can't do some of it when the rivers are too high. So yeah, that it's still expected that the work will be completed. That's what they're telling us for 30 June. It's just that they are behind schedule. So that's why there's those negative expenditure variances from budget.
Okay, so we have confidence that there is good financial management amongst these activity centres. So thank you for that. Do we have any other questions on the activity reports? No. Okay, righto. Treasury report.
The Treasury report. The next section is the activity performance report.
Oh, sorry.
Which
Yep,
is,
go for it.
Mike, are you happy if I hand over to Mike?
Yep. Sorry, Mike.
Oh, that's okay. So taking you to page 24, and that gives you oversight of our 69 targets that we have in our LTP that flow through into annual report. It's coming up soon. It's called before. The key shifts are you've got 2 additional reds compared to when we last reported for Q2. So there's been 2 additional reds there associated with public transport and reliability of the service, and you're well aware of the issues there, been well reported. And landowner reported issues around river management. And again, that's a very tough red, that one, because it's a very high target, 100%. And I think if you've obviously read the report, there's high performance going on there. aspirational target. So, but we'll have a positive narrative around that in our annual report. So it's not all about the traffic light. And there's some shifts in yellows. And again, there's performance occurring behind those yellows. The narrative thinking ahead to annual report will be positive in the large part. And you can see those yellows as you move down through the report. So I'll just stop there and open up to questions.
It's nice and clear, Mike.
Is there anything there that you would like to draw our attention to, really, Mike? Is there that's the reason I'm asking this is these reports are reasonably complicated. This whole set of reports for financials are quite daunting for non-financial people.
So, okay, well, by way of example, if you drop down onto page 29, you can see the regional leadership activity there, and it's under the governance and engagement activity. You can see the commentary around what the yellow is there around community survey completion. While there has been a bit of a shift there and awareness, it didn't meet our target, so that's why it's sitting at yellow. I'll just say an overview for thinking ahead around the annual report. When we codify these in terms of the colour, we've got to think about external audit, because they come in here and they look at the stuff and they're very tough. They're very black and white. So that's what we've tried to do, and it sort of covers what we land on. Regional planning, you can see the yellow there. The urban strategy may not be drafted by 30 June. Again, that's due to just bums on seats. But the work is still planned. There's a timing issue there. And then dropping down to page 30, again looking at the yellows. History monitoring report is delayed. Again, it'll be coming through.
All of the yellows and reds will have a description in the annual report, because most of them are, as Mike's saying, programs that have started, and sometimes they're programs that are quite well progressed. It's just that those markers for the traffic lights are actually quite black and white. It's 100%. It's that they've got to be completed, and 95% completed is not completed for a green.
If it's not green, it requires an explanation in the annual report. So that's basically what you're seeing here. The explanation from here flows through into the annual report, and that's what the auditors expect. They'll verify if we said that it was green, they'll want proof that it was. If we said it was yellow, then they'll look at it and go, yeah, they agree that it is yellow, not red, and then they'll want that explained in the annual report.
Okay. Anita, I notice your hands up. You want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clarify. I just overheard Mike saying something about the regional urban strategy, and I got a sense, without throwing myself under the bus, he might have said it was underway. Just to be totally clear, it's not underway. We have only had one urban planner in the urban vacancy for 10 weeks, and they are fully occupied with both FDSs. So that will be, and probably should already be, a red. So that work isn't underway and won't be started while we only have one urban policy analyst in the role.
Okay, Mike, back to you if you've got anything further to.
It's just working down through the report and looking at page 30, land and water. You've got some narrative around what the three yellows are. Estuary monitoring report, the delay there. They target catchment, community catchments. they've got a timing around their reporting, but it is going to come through and just won't hit the 30 June mark. But the council will be receiving it. And the catchment action approach has been revised, and with that, the timeframe's been extended. Flowing down into biodiversity, biosecurity activity. Got one yellow there around your biodiversity monitoring program, might not be fully developed. And it's currently still in draft form. Dropping down to page 31.
No, that's a question on you.
Yeah, one. Yep.
Look, Patsy, question for Anita, because we were fortunate last night to socialise and be introduced to a new staff member, and I think AIR is one that many of our ratepayers are interested in, and it's got a note in the staff vacancy, which I think was about the plan. I think you've got some good news on that front, Anita.
Through the chair, we've got a senior analyst who started the week of Easter. She's come over from the UK and she's working on the air plan review and has hit it at speed. So our target around the air plan was to have issues and options papers to council by 30th of June. They may not make it by June, but they should make it by about July or August. So she's moving incredibly well at pace to get that program of work on track. So
Great to
yeah.
hear. Don't take any opportunity not to have a good news story, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, can I just ask you on your commentary on the reds? So some reds have got crosses in the wee circle and some have got lines.
Yeah,
Does the cross mean you're out of control, out of our?
I think it's just the formatting thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Red should be the cross.
yeah.
Yeah,
Probably
okay.
find the one there that's got a red with a dash instead of a
there's
cross.
yes.
Probably it's just had the colour change from last time, and then hasn't had the symbol changed to be the cross.
Oh, that's right. I just
Just
thought it
a
might be
typo.
because it was out of our hands. That's good.
It's not that sophisticated.
It's a PDF copy of the paste icon.
Yeah, it's about the colour.
So on page 31, flood protection, drainage, river management, there's I guess the two yellow and one red. I mean, it looks like that half the program is being sort of completed. Any concerns there?
Yes, so again, I mean, it's 81% with for the renewal programs. It feels like a good news story. You've got 81% of delivery, the target's 90, so it's up there. And with your remaining 5 projects, as it says, awaiting third-party review and consenting, so it's the pipelines there.
So that was what I was discussing with the expenditure, how there's a whole lot of planning that has to go into actually being able to do that work. So that's what Mike's talking about with the consenting and planning, as well as the fact of the river levels that potentially they may not get done by 30 June, but that's why it's orange. It is looking like it will potentially get done.
And the other yellow in there as well is a tough one where, there is again just short of the 90% target with the plan river maintenance action work. So a lot of work's occurring. The program has been just hasn't quite hit the 90%. So again, aspirational, but some good work going on. And then your emergency management yellow around the staff vacancies, and recruitment challenges there.
Yep.
That training target.
Okay, and then we drop down to the service measure quarterly results, which is actually quite a good diagram showing what's completed and what's sort of still to complete.
Yeah, so that the key thing there, that's showing you the shift from Q2, and it's giving you that sense of how things are tracking over the year. And as I've said at the start, there's an additional 2 reds from when we last set in front of you at Q2.
Yeah.
So really that's just summarising what you've read above. What's the detail rather?
This is a difficult meeting to chair, I tell you. There's, should be more questions on this. This is our annual plan broken down into the milestones, the performance milestones that are in place, and it's the measure that achieving those milestones that actually give us the comfort that the organisation is actually meeting that annual plan. So it's and as we go through our long-term plan exercise, we'll be identifying these key performance indicators again all the way through. So it's a very important document for us as a council to be aware of, whether the organisation is meeting these objectives or not. The format of this report is good. The colours, the greens, the oranges, the reds are very helpful. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
In fairness though, we're at Q3.
Yep.
And we are, as has been explained over and over again with a lot of our questions, there is still either variances or differentials still to be met that will be met by Q4. And so I think maybe the lack of questions is not our intention. It is just that the position we sit at and the sound explanations that are coming from staff already around Q4 will give us the complete picture. And at that time, then we'll have a lot more questions.
No, it's fair enough. Thanks, Gary. Okay.
If you want to encourage the questions,
Oh, no, Kate, we don't. That's all right.
Oh, yeah, I've stopped because he doesn't seem to.
I can always depend on you.
Wait, look.
Could I just jump? Sorry.
Yeah, Mike.
Councillor Keller's point was a good one, in that from a high level perspective, a strategic perspective, that slide on 24, and I probably might be sticking my neck out here, but it feels like that's going to be a year-end position. Reading through the commentary underneath, and that's why I was sort of making the comments around the narrative that we're looking at, and there's a positive element to a lot of the yellows that you're seeing that will be, and the positive narrative around that will be coming through into that final annual report, which is the statutory bit that goes out to the community, the bit that we're required to do. This reporting we're doing quarterly is for your assurance purposes. We don't have to do it. We're doing it for your assurance, and it's ties in with what Gary's sort of saying.
Well, the narrative for me is that the one thing we succeeded on is picking 3 sites to do some work on. I don't think we prioritised the next sites to work on because that's part of the long-term plan. I get that. The 70 on page 24 is 1%, and I think you'll find that that's the 1% that we've succeeded on is picking Tuakatoto, Lake Hayes, and the other one, which I can't think of. Tomahawk, yeah. We've done that. Is I think the 1% we've definitely ticked off and proceeding with. 70% is work in progress, which is great. 16%, if I went through the 16% and the 7% that aren't on track, so many of those are influenced by government policy changes or waiting for the biodiversity, Indigenous biodiversity strategy, and a whole lot of things that it's confused that they're outside of our hands, and some of them are OCC and other groups that we're partnering with. I'm really, I think it's a really, really good measure. I agree with you. But the narrative behind it is that sometimes it's not our fault, and it's certainly not our staff fault. So, and given a really complex and hard time to get staff to do some of the work that is required because it's been required to be done throughout the country. So I think the narrative behind there, it really tells a really good story, and hence possibly not needing the questions.
Okay, can we roll on?
Yeah, so if you're happy if I move on with my
do it.
last paper. So there is on, I'm sorry, on my page, it's page 37. It may be slightly 1 or 2 pages different on yours. That is just a summary table of the detailed activity report. So we've already discussed the variances. I've got those tables of the $100,000 variances for the revenue and expenses for the program. This is actually a detailed a detailed table which shows you the operating capital, other expenditure, as well as the revenue sources for each of those programs, and then their surplus deficit compared to the annual plan and where those are funded from. So that's just additional information if you wanted to have a look at it in relation to your program, especially around some of those questions with the transport, etc., where it's within a revenue class, but overall for the profit of the program has not affected it compared to budget. You're going to ask me a question on my tiny thing that
Thanks, Sarah. Can you just explain to me what other expenditure is?
So I ran Kate through this. Other is, other should be non-cash costs, so it should be depreciation, but we also put in there any adjustment that we do to home base and overheads, because these activities are, the active above the line that we report the activities to the community. Below the line, we have a whole lot of, like property and IT and vehicles and exec sits there and various other HR, health and safety. Those costs get allocated up into all the other costs, into all the activities. What we do is we budget for that in the operating expenditure. So in that column there, that includes operating expenditure, includes staff costs, if you like, external supplies and services. So that's anything that we're paying invoices to other people, consultants, lawyers, contractors, anything like that is there. And also operating also includes the internal charges, the overheads. But that's where when we report this, we report just the budgeted amount as the actual in the operating. And if there's any variance to that, we show the variance in the reallocation, and that variance sits in the other, so that you can see sort of where the core costs, like your staff costs and any external expenditure, if we're over or underspending, you'll then see that more clearly in the operating expenditure. And then if it's to do with other costs or where staff costs that hasn't gone to the activities, it'll ultimately get reallocated back, but it'll be done in that other column.
Sweet. It's a week, but yeah. So eventually, by the end of the year, there won't be anything in other.
there will always be something in other. There's always our budget of what we, I don't want to say expect staff to do, but our budget of how much training, for example, how much annual leave, how much sick leave a person will take is normally not always perfect. Some areas have had larger training requirements due to central government reform that's coming out that they need to do training on. That potentially wasn't budgeted, but is something that would go to an internal cost code for their area and needs to be, it then affects that other expenditure column because they've spent more time on internal things than on their chargeable jobs. Now, there's a valid reason for that, but that is what that adjustment column is showing. And it's not always training, there are some other elements. Yeah, but that's an example of something that would be flowing through there.
Okay, well, thank you.
From my mind, that's an operational expense. And what I'm really clear when I'm asking those sort of questions is, are we covering our operating expenses, which we should be covering with our rates, as opposed to our capital? And so, and that is another, if it's another, I don't want to get the wrong word here, another expenditure is actually another operating expenditure and should be beside that, so that we can
move that.
Yeah, because those together, if we're not covering that in the rates thing, then we actually are looking at issues. And yeah, generational debt isn't good.
And on the same form, your other income is basically your fees and charges.
Yes.
Yeah, other fees and charges. Bus fare revenue.
Oh, you wrote that down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would be the big two that are in that.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions on that?
It'd be really good to get those on A3 or something? A big piece of paper?
Well, they are printed on A3, but then when they're scanned in here, of course, Diligent just compacts it all into one size. But when when they're designed to be printed onto A3 sheets.
You could have one of those to scribble all over.
I can provide you that with the next finance.
Do
Yeah.
it at the end of the financial year, it's easy.
Would anyone else like an A4 copy? Just one copy? That's fine. I can do that. That's not a problem. The last part of the report is the Treasury report. So this shows the first graph is our term deposits. It really shows our cash flow. So how much operating cash we've got and how much cash we've got in term deposits. You'll see that there was a spike, obviously, at March, which was our, as I described earlier in the balance sheet, which was actually our funding that we received from the LGFA. So that is what caused that cash to obviously jump up, was us receiving that funding. Underneath that table is a summary table in our portfolio performance. So that is our managed fund portfolio. So it's broken down the interest, the dividends, other, which actually includes our fees, etc., for selling as well as managing the fund, selling things within the fund as well as managing it, the market value movement, and then obviously the overall increase or decrease in the managed fund. The second graph, which is on the right-hand column, is the way that our portfolio is split within the managed fund. So we have actual versus our SIPO amount. So our SIPO has obviously controls in there on what our targeted holding should be in each of those. And it's just graphing that compared to the target. And the graph the table underneath. Yeah, sorry, Nick's just showing that my formula didn't update on the SIPO underneath in the table. Sorry about that. The table underneath on the right hand column is showing the first column shows our dollar amount and what percentage that is of the managed fund, and then our SIPO expected amount against the SIPO target. And I do apologise, the New Zealand equities figure for the SIPO one, I've accidentally dragged down the same formula. It hasn't updated itself as I've dragged it down. So I do apologise for that. So the Australian equities and the international equities, as well as the total for the SIPO amount expected, is actually incorrect. So all of, we check the SIPO measurements every single month on the managed fund, and we make sure that they're within their requirements. So they are all within the range of what we've required, and they have been throughout the entire financial year.
Does everyone understand what SIPO is? Lots, some shaking of the heads.
So the SIPO outlines our investment plan. So it's an agreement.
It's a statement
of investment policy.
Okay.
And objectives.
So it outlines, I suppose, in blanket terms for JBWere, it outlines the rules that we would like our managed fund managed by. So it outlines not only a range of how each investment should be, but it also has a target of what we would like our fund to be. But they ultimately manage our fund to obviously recover the best return for us. Yeah. So in certain months, they will drop potentially a type in our portfolio, still within the range, to take advantage of perhaps something that they know in the market conditions that would be advantageous for us.
Yeah. So Sarah, just in terms of the spreadsheet error there, what sort of impact does it have? What should we be
so you could recalculate it. The SIPO expected amount would be the managed fund times the SIPO target.
We'll email
15,
and
15,
update that
15.
table.
Yeah.
Would be the easiest thing, so that you can you've got a record of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rather than trying to work it out on the fly.
Yeah. Helen.
Yeah, at an earlier meeting, or it might have been audit and risk, we've decided to do some further work around ethical investments and that. Is there an update on where that might be?
Yep. JBWere's lined up to come to audit and risk next month. I think it's 22nd of June. So usually audit and risk is in the afternoon, but they'll be coming down in the morning. So we'll, I think the placeholder's in there for the day. But it's probably be looking to have a workshop with them sort of 10:30. So that's well underway.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just on that, does SIPO go to audit and risk or come to us? And is that the time that if we were going to implement anything we could?
So SIPO goes through audit and risk. It's on their terms of reference for them to manage that. So So yeah, do the workshop, and then the idea would be out of that, audit and risk can work out where they want to go to from there. And then whether that leads to an amendment in the SIPO, and how audit and risk wants to manage making that change, and whether they want to, do it out of cycle, and we'll just have to work through that. But first thing is get around the table and have the discussion with JB Ware and audit and risk, and work out what they do or don't want to do.
Thank you.
Good. I think we've got to the end of that. So we've got a recommendation that the Finance Committee notes this report and activity and financial performance reports for the period 1st of July to the 31st of March 2023. Can somebody moves that? Thanks, Lloyd. Second. Alan, thank you very much. Okay, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Okay, it's carried. Right. Do you want a 5-minute break? Yeah, here to carry on. Okay, right, let's roll on then. The long-term plan. Mike, is it, or?
Yeah. Look, this very short, simple paper, it's just a noting paper. I was instructed to put the May 11 timeline approach that you considered and discussed and gave direction on the Finance Committee agenda. So here it is. And in the discussion section, I've just really highlighted things that were discussed at the workshop, but aren't necessarily clear on the diagram around mana whenua and their involvement in the process, and B, the milestones align with the December 6 pre-draft LTP deliverable. So it's dealing with everything that occurs up to Christmas, and see that the timelines on that left margin are being refined and diarised, and D, that diagram forms the basis of reporting via the CEO to you, to council. That's otherwise it's just the exact approach that we discussed in May 11.
So this is more a formality.
It is.
You're just getting an assurance from council that we're on track with this long-term plan process. Is that all this is? That's
right. Yes, just bringing it through from the workshop into committee, and giving a bit more formal status.
Okay. So discussion. Right.
Yeah, Cole, hey, thanks for this. Just as a matter of interest, it's probably a silly question, but you've got the dates, and then you've got in your lips, you've got a description. So the first workshop is on current state. The 29th of June one is on draft strategic directions. The July one, 27th, is on future delivery. They align, yeah?
It's chronological, yeah.
Yeah, but like you're not going to push.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, it's all, yeah, it's linear, yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not going to try to squeeze two of them into the June one. And
no. So the date, yeah, it all aligns as you read it.
Thank you.
So yeah, we'll be bringing some current state. Yeah, first came off the rank current state presentations.
A follow-up question. So I mean, one of the key ones, of course, is the draft strategic directions. Any insights in terms of that particular process?
That was all about the workshop yesterday, and that's been driven by AJ and Doug, and they went away with some good direction, and are bringing back a deliverable that's what that milestone's about.
One, as opposed to actual.
So two is what they're bringing back from that series of sessions that you've worked through.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, good job.
I'm happy to move the recommendations. I don't really have a question, but some comments.
Okay. Seconded.
Seconded, yep. Yeah, so it's fantastic. This is the first time we will have presented the approach publicly. So it's a really important process in which this council is starting earlier than ever before. And the reason for that is that we genuinely want to have really high quality community input into this process to present genuine options, because as we know, an LTP is pretty important, projecting out to 10 years ahead, but with detailed information for the first 3. So yeah, with having noted that year 3 of our annual plan was cementing in what the community envisaged for the last 3 years, it's going to be a chance to have a look at visioning out what the community actually wants for after this growth phase of building our capacity and our capability. What is it that we can best deliver for our community that builds on that? Have we got that right? We'd like to think we've built a pretty solid foundation, and actually we're not going to see massive jumps and needing to fund unexpected things. So hopefully some stability into the next period. But are we on track? Are there things that we should be doing? Are there things we shouldn't be doing? And as you can see there, even in September, we've got external engagement. So seeking some input a lot earlier so that we can shape up together with community where we're heading in a lot more of a genuine manner. So we're putting in a whole lot of work, and by we, particularly our staff here, Mike and Nick and all the team, they've put in a lot of work on top of presenting the annual plan as well to us. So thanks heaps for everything you've done in that space. That's cementing where we've come to, but also helping us to do this process. I think it's very well thought through, starting there with current state, which is going to be really important. That's going to be 2 days of us sitting down and hearing from all of the managers throughout our organisation exactly what they've been working on currently, which you often don't do. You'll see the financial reports like we've just seen, and a deep dive into more detail verbally what's actually happening in each area is going to be absolutely fantastic for us to build from. And then, with that strategic work that we have been doing and doing in partnership with Mana Whenua as well, visioning out more broadly as to what are our priorities. And they've changed so much too, haven't they? When you look back on the 3 years and where we were visioning 3 years ago, prior to COVID, prior to a lot of reforms, things have changed dramatically. So it's important that we're doing that work. And then also, as I said, not just us internally, that it's our community doing that work with us. So yeah, I'm really excited by I know it sounds a diagram and it sounds very procedural, but I think it's going to be fantastic for this council and for the community. So thanks heaps for the work.
Andrew.
Just following up on the chair's comments, it does certainly build a solid foundation for us. We've also started earlier than probably what we would normally done for a 10-year plan, and it also gives that a great opportunity for the organisation to take a real stock take of where we're at and where we want to head as well. So yeah, a really solid foundation, and it's being done in a timely way, so it gives us plenty of opportunity to work on building that solid foundation, starting off with that vision as we've been working on yesterday.
Thank you. I want to concur with the chair. I think it is a really exciting opportunity for our community to get involved in this early. I'll make one comment, and I'm sure it was a slip of the lip, but she mentioned that we do for Otago. I think what we have to do is work with our communities. And to that end, I think if we look at the last 2 days, yesterday, without a trumpet here, we imposed an 18% rate rise on the basis that of an existing long-term plan. But quite clearly in the reports today, there has been extra in there for staff that we haven't needed. And what I think the real tension for us is when we look at the current state stuff is understanding every line item and where those savings may come yet, not thinking those are savings to be spent, but delivering better and more efficiently, but also saying are the things that we need to take out that the community may not be driving. We've spent a huge amount of work and money on government changes, which suspected changes like the Indigenous biodiversity. It's been 3 years of waiting, whereas we may have been better not to future think that stuff and just let it happen and then react. So there may be some savings in there. We need to be driving to efficiencies. We need to be driving to getting the outcomes and reducing our costs if we can, and giving those cost savings up to the community or back to the community, but also looking potentially at how we can work more efficiently with them and delivering what they want. Now, there are some things that we're not delivering that I'm hearing the community want us to deliver, like citizen science platforms, and I appreciate there's a time frame for that. Showing our long-term plan, and this is where the art of communication is going to be the hardest for our staff, is what the current state is in those projects, and then what do those work programs look like long-term. That is going to be the one thing that we can deliver that will get our community on board better with those rate rises or savings as we go forward, and a much better discussion on where the savings may be had and where efficiencies may be had. And so to that end, I really like this work plan, but I'm very, very aspirational what it actually means on the ground, and I hope we can deliver that.
Okay, so we have a motion which has been put and seconded. Need to vote on that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's it. Right. Meeting's closed. Thank you.
Okay.
The Karakia. Okay. I can do that if you want. It's Kua Mātu, Mātua Mahi, Mo Tēnā Wai, Manaki Tā Mai Mātu Katoa, Mo Mātua Hoa, Mo Mātua Whānau, Auki Te Aorangi.